Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Yeah,
Today, we're looking at U.S. government spending.
sounds riveting.
Oh, it is. It is, trust me.
Okay.
We'll be going through some eyebrow-raising information about everything from defense contracts to nonprofits.
To Dogecoin?
Yeah, to Dogecoin. We'll get there.
Okay.
But I think a good place to start would be the nonprofit sector in the U.S.
Yeah, it's huge. So we're talking about like trillions of dollars in revenue annually.
Trillions with a T.
Trillions with a T.
Wow.
And a good chunk of that, about 29% or roughly $880 billion, came from government agencies in 2020.
Almost a third of all that funding comes directly from the government.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant portion.
We'd think that with all that money going around, there would be more oversight or something.
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like with the increasing number of NGOs.
NGO.
Yeah, non-governmental organizations.
Oh. Well.
In just a few decades, they've exploded from like 1948 to over 3,000 in 2010.
3,000.
3,382 to be exact. Whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, and this NGO boom, it like coincides with that increase in government funding to the entire sector.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Is all that money being used well, though?
that's a big question.
Like, are there enough safeguards in place to prevent misuse of funds or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone remembers the Clinton Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And there was that whole thing about conflicts of interest and stuff.
Makes you think.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, whenever you have tons of money changing hands, there's going to be potential for misuse.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So with all this government funding going to nonprofits and all these NGOs popping up, are there enough safeguards in place?
Well, it's definitely a valid concern.
Yeah.
Like anytime you have large amounts of money going back and forth, there's that potential for misuse. And the rapid growth of NGOs definitely raises questions about oversight and accountability. It's crucial to ensure that these organizations are being transparent and the funds are being used the way they're supposed to be used.
Okay. So we've got this huge amount of government money going to nonprofits, a whole bunch more NGOs popping up.
Right.
But let's zoom out for a sec and look at where all of our tax dollars are going.
Okay.
What are the biggest areas of government spending?
So when you break down the federal budget, most of it goes to healthcare,
Okay.
like Medicare and Medicaid mostly.
Right.
And then after that, you have Social Security and Defense.
Yeah.
And then the interest we pay on our national debt.
Those are like the big four you always hear about, but like how many of us really understand what those numbers actually translate to in like real money?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that over the past 20 years, the government has made an estimated $2.7 trillion in improper payments.
Hold on, wait.
Yeah.
$2.7 trillion.
That's the estimate.
What are improper payments, though? And why is that happening so much?
It basically means money that was paid out wrong, whether it was a mistake, fraud, or just not having the right paperwork.
Oh.
It's a problem that's been around for a long time, but it just seems to be getting worse.
Like how much worse?
Well, 2 years ago, improper payments hit $281 billion.
Oh.
And then last year, it was still a whopping $235 billion.
So where is all this money going?
It's kind of spread across all the government programs, but the worst ones are Medicare and Medicaid, $51 billion and $50.3 billion, respectively.
Jeez.
Then there's the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which was set up during the pandemic. Well, that had $43 billion in improper payments.
Yeah, a lot of people were really struggling then.
And of course, there was the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Paycheck Protection Program, loan forgiveness, billions in improper payments there too.
That's billions of dollars essentially wasted because of errors and potentially fraud in programs that are meant to help people. It's kind of alarming.
Yeah, it is.
Well, let's move on to something that's been all over the news lately, the Pentagon. I mean, everyone knows they have a huge budget, but there's also been a lot of talk about their accounting practices or lack thereof.
Yeah, their accounting has been worrisome for years.
I mean, how bad is it?
Well, last year they had $35 trillion in accounting adjustments.
35 trillion.
Trillion, yeah.
That's more than the entire U.S. economy.
It's a crazy number. But it gets worse. They also can't account for 63% of their assets, which are valued at around $4 trillion.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
So they made $35 trillion in accounting adjustments and can't find trillions of dollars worth of their own assets.
Basically, yeah.
So what does that mean? Like, practically?
So imagine you're trying to, like, balance your checkbook, but you have no idea where most of your money went.
Oh, that's not
That's
good.
pretty much what's happening at the Pentagon.
Wow.
And they've even admitted to buying equipment they don't need because they can't track what they have.
So they're just throwing money at problems without knowing if they're actually fixing anything.
Sometimes, yeah. But to make it all even worse, they've been getting audited for the past 7 years and have never passed one.
7 years and not one past audit. You'd think they'd figure it out eventually.
Well, there's that time Jon Stewart was on C-SPAN and asked a Pentagon official about these audit failures.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And he said that the audit failures don't automatically mean that there's, waste, fraud, or abuse.
Interesting take.
Definitely raises some questions, especially when you look at some specific examples of overspending at the Pentagon.
Okay, let's hear it. What are some ways the Pentagon is wasting our money? I feel like this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Hit me with it.
Well, like that time, the Air Force was overcharged by like 8,000% for soap dispensers.
No way. How much were these soap dispensers?
Like $4,000 each.
$4,000 for a soap dispenser. Who approved that?
Then there's Boeing. They overcharged the Air Force by almost $1 million for some stuff for their C-17 aircraft. Oh, and Raytheon had to pay almost $1 billion to settle an investigation into overcharging for their government contracts.
Sounds like a pretty good business model. Overcharge the government.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And of course, there's the classics, like the $640 toilet seats back in the 80s.
Right.
Or what about that $7,600 coffee maker for specific aircraft? I mean, come on.
It's funny, but also kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, these examples might be kind of funny, but it points to a bigger problem with the lack of accountability and oversight.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got the overpriced soap dispensers and coffee makers.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's some bigger stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Where else has the Pentagon been overspending?
So between 1998 and 2015, the Pentagon recorded $21 trillion in unsupported accounting adjustments.
How is that even possible? 21 trillion. That's more than our national debt.
It's a complicated issue, but it really shows the problems with their accounting.
Yeah.
It's like they've been operating in a financial black hole. And then you have things like the $2 billion zombie satellite program that was still getting funded even after it was canceled.
A zombie satellite program.
Yep, it's true.
Wild.
And who could forget about those $1,280 paper clips? Makes you wonder who's signing off on these things.
Okay, so we've got soap dispensers, coffee makers, zombie satellites, and $1,000 paper clips. What else?
Well, the F-35 fighter jet program has been pretty controversial.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, so it's the most expensive weapons system in history, costing over $1.7 trillion.
Man.
It's had a ton of problems and delays.
$1.7 trillion for a fighter jet that doesn't work.
It's crazy, right?
Absolutely insane.
And then some more specific examples would be like the millions of dollars spent building buildings in Afghanistan that were never used, or the $300,000 that was wasted on ineffective camouflage. Oh, and the Pentagon paid the NFL $6.8 million to promote patriotism.
The Pentagon paid the NFL millions of dollars to promote patriotism. That's just...
Wow.
Oh.
Doesn't that make you think about their priorities?
It really does, but it's not just the Pentagon spending all this money. We have to think about the companies that are getting these contracts, too.
Right, the government contractors.
They rely so much on taxpayer money, like how much are we talking?
Oh, it's a lot.
And does that create a conflict of interest?
Well, let's look at Booz Allen Hamilton. They're a consulting firm.
Okay.
97% of their revenue comes from government contracts.
97%.
Yeah.
They're basically an arm of the government at this point.
Then there's Lockheed Martin.
I've heard of them.
Well, they're a big defense contractor, and they get 99% of their revenue from government contracts.
It makes you wonder if they're actually looking out for the best interests of the country.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Now, Raytheon is a little more diversified. They had 48% of their revenue coming from government contracts in 2022, and they're predicting it'll be around 53.3% in 2024.
So even if they're more diverse, it's still a huge chunk of their business. Okay, so we've got this whole system of government contractors making bank on these government contracts.
Yeah.
It's kind of a black hole, but let's move on to healthcare spending. I know we touched on Medicare and Medicaid a little earlier, but those are just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Healthcare spending has been skyrocketing for decades now.
Yeah.
Like if you look at this chart, you can see how much Medicare spending has increased
Wow.
from just $500 million in 1970 to $1 trillion today.
$1 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of a lot of countries.
And Medicaid is the same.
What's causing this?
It's a lot of different factors, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now for something completely different, Dogecoin.
What?
Yeah, you heard me right. Dogecoin, the cryptocurrency.
Okay.
And believe it or not, it's actually connected to government spending.
I'm intrigued.
So Dogecoin is actually being promoted as a way to fight fraud in government programs, specifically Medicare.
Wait, Dogecoin. The meme coin.
The one and only.
I don't get it. How is that even possible?
Well, it all starts with Elon Musk.
Got
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, and a big supporter of Dogecoin. He's been really vocal about government transparency and sees Dogecoin as a way to get that. So Elon Musk likes Dogecoin and wants to use it to fight fraud in Medicare. That's an interesting combination.
It is, yeah.
What's the thinking behind that?
So Dogecoin and other cryptocurrencies are built with blockchain technology,
Right.
which keeps a record of transactions that's transparent and secure.
Okay.
So they think that could be used to track Medicare payments and flag any suspicious activity.
So using Dogecoin and blockchain tech could make Medicare less susceptible to fraud and more transparent.
That's the idea.
It's a bold claim.
For sure, and there are definitely challenges.
Yeah.
But it's worth looking into.
Has there been any progress in this area, like using Dogecoin to fight Medicare fraud?
Well, there have been some attempts to get Medicare data to investigate possible fraud, but it hasn't been easy.
Yes.
Like Judge Engelmeer blocked attempts to get the data at first, which raises some questions about transparency.
It does. Like, if they're so against sharing data, what are they hiding?
Right. It shows how important it is to keep pushing for more transparency in how the government spends money, especially when it comes to things like healthcare, where fraud can really hurt people.
Okay, so we've got Dogecoin, blockchain, Elon Musk, and a legal battle over Medicare data. This is definitely not your average conversation about government spending.
It's very 21st century.
Yeah.
Technology is changing everything so fast, and now it's impacting the government too.
So what does this mean for us? Like, how can we as citizens make a difference in all of this? With the spending, contractors, and fraud, how can we impact this?
That's a great question, and it's something that we're going to keep digging into as we continue this deep dive.
Can't wait.
Stay tuned.
I'm definitely going to stay tuned.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
You know, it's easy to just focus on these crazy numbers we've been talking about. Trillions here, billions there. But it's important to remember that behind all that money, there are real people.
Right. Like when we talk about Social Security or healthcare costs, we're talking about things that affect real people, families.
Exactly. And that's what gets me, like, there's this disconnect. You know, we hear about all these big programs designed to help people,
Right.
but then we see all this waste and inefficiency.
Yeah.
And honestly, it makes you wonder if these systems can even be fixed.
It's a real challenge for sure. And I think that disconnect between what's promised and what actually happens is a big reason why people don't trust the government.
Yeah, totally.
When you see your tax dollars being wasted, you get cynical.
For sure. So how do we get past that? How do we go from being mad to actually doing something about it? Is there even any hope for making things better when it comes to government spending?
I think there's always hope.
Okay.
We live in a democracy.
Right.
The power is with the people. We have a say in how the government works and how our money is spent.
That sounds good. But how do we as individuals actually make a difference? It feels like we're up against a giant.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But there are some things we can do, like first, stay informed.
Okay, so knowledge is power.
Yeah, the more you know about how the government works, where the money goes, and what the problems are, the better you can hold your leaders accountable.
So where do we even start? Where do we get this information?
There are tons of resources out there.
Okay.
Like the Government Accountability Office, the GAO.
Okay.
They do some really great work investigating these programs, and they put out these reports, highlighting the waste and stuff, and those are all available to the public.
The GAO, got it. What else?
Then you have these watchdog groups, like the Project on Government Oversight, POGO, and the Center for Public Integrity.
Okay.
They're dedicated to exposing corruption and holding people accountable. They use investigative journalism and whistleblowers to find this stuff out, and then they make it public.
So we've got the GAO, POGO, and the Center for Public Integrity. That's a good start. Anything else we can do to stay informed?
Well, keeping up with the news is super important. Like, pay attention to how your representatives are voting. Are they supporting things that promote transparency? Are they questioning wasteful spending?
So local news is probably a good resource too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because they'll be covering stuff more specific to our communities.
Exactly. And don't forget about social media. Follow journalists and organizations that focus on this stuff. Share information, raise awareness.
The more people who know what's going on, the better,
For
right?
sure, the more pressure we can put on our leaders to clean things up.
Okay, so we need to stay informed.
Right.
But what about taking action? How do we go from complaining to making a real difference?
I think one of the best things you can do is to contact your representatives.
Hmm.
Let them know you're paying attention and that you expect them to be responsible with your money.
So call, write letters, send emails, stuff like that.
Exactly. Make your voice heard.
Contacting your representatives. Got it. What else?
Support candidates who care about fiscal responsibility.
Right. So when you're voting, pay attention to what they're saying and their track record.
Exactly. Do they have a history of fighting for transparency? Do they have a plan to address all this waste?
Voting is super important, but what if you want to do more, like be more actively involved?
There are a bunch of ways to do that.
Okay.
You can join or donate to those organizations we were just talking about.
Okay.
You can even volunteer to help with investigations or their outreach.
Volunteering, donating, good options. Any others?
You could participate in protests or rallies.
Right.
Some groups organize these demonstrations to raise awareness about government waste.
Hmm.
It's a way to make your voice heard and connect with other people who are concerned about this stuff.
So it's about finding what works for you and getting involved in a way that feels meaningful.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that you don't have to do everything.
Right.
Just pick one thing and start there.
Yeah, every little bit helps.
For sure.
This is all great advice, but I'm still feeling a little overwhelmed.
I get it.
The problems are so big.
Yeah.
How can we possibly make a difference?
Well, change doesn't happen overnight.
Right?
It's gradual, and you have to keep at it. It's like a marathon, not a sprint.
A marathon, I like that. It's about pacing yourself, staying focused, and not giving up.
And working together, you can't do this alone. It takes a movement of people who are demanding better.
So it's about changing our mindset.
Yeah,
Instead of feeling helpless, we need to feel empowered to take action.
exactly. It's about taking back our role as active participants in our democracy and demanding a government that actually serves the people.
Okay, feeling a little better now, but let's go back to some of the specifics we talked about earlier,
Okay.
like Medicare and the potential for fraud.
Right.
Are there any other government programs that are particularly susceptible to waste and abuse?
Well, Social Security is a big one.
Yeah, Social Security.
It's something that millions of people rely on, but it's also facing some serious issues.
It's like everyone knows there's a problem, but no one knows how to fix it.
It's a complicated issue, but basically the program is projected to go insolvent pretty soon.
Insolvent, what does that even mean?
And basically it means they won't have enough money to pay everyone what they're owed.
Oh, so people who rely on Social Security might not get their money.
If nothing changes, yeah, people could see their benefits go down.
That's scary.
It is, and it's definitely something that politicians don't want to deal with.
I bet, but it has to be addressed, right?
Yeah, we can't just ignore it and hope it goes away.
So what can be done about it? No one wants to cut benefits, and no one wants to raise taxes.
I know it's tough, but we have to have an honest conversation about this and consider all the options. Maybe it's adjusting benefits and raising taxes a little. Maybe it's finding ways to make it more efficient.
Yeah, it's got to be something.
Right.
So Social Security is a big one. What about education?
Education is so important. It's an investment in our future.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. One of the big challenges is this disconnect between how much we spend and the actual results.
Right, we keep spending more and more money, but we're not seeing better results.
Right. If you look at this chart, you can see how much more we're spending per student.
Wow, it's a lot.
But the scores for reading, math, and science has stayed pretty much the same.
So why isn't it working?
There are a lot of factors, but one of the biggest issues is the bureaucracy. We have this huge education system with all this administration, and so much money is just wasted on overhead.
I've heard that argument before.
Yeah.
Like even Bill Maher, who's not exactly a fiscal conservative, has criticized the Department of Education,
Right.
saying it's basically just a middleman that takes taxpayer money and doesn't actually make education better.
It's definitely a perspective that's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
And there's evidence to support it too, like that GAO report that said the Department of Education underestimated the cost of the federal direct loan program by $311 billion.
Wow, $311 billion. That's insane. How did they get it so wrong?
Well, it seems like they made some bad assumptions about how borrowers would behave. They thought it would generate over $100 billion in revenue, but it actually ended up costing taxpayers $200 billion.
Oh.
It just shows how inefficient bureaucracy and a lack of accountability can lead to huge financial losses.
Okay, so Social Security is facing insolvency, education spending isn't getting us better results, and the Pentagon can't even keep track of its money.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's pretty bleak, isn't it?
It is definitely challenging, but it's important to remember that we can do something about it.
But how? These are huge systemic problems. We can't just magically fix them.
True, there's no easy fix,
Okay.
but we can start by demanding better.
Okay.
We need to demand transparency, accountability, and better use of our money. We need to support candidates who share those values and hold the ones in office accountable.
So we need to change the culture.
Yeah, we need to stop accepting this as normal.
Stop accepting waste and inefficiency as just the way things are.
Right. And start demanding more.
Okay, that's all pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Can we talk about something a little more, I don't know, hopeful?
Sure, I think there are reasons to be optimistic.
Okay.
I mean, more and more people are becoming aware of these problems, and there's a growing movement pushing for more transparency and accountability in the government.
And technology's playing a role too, right?
Absolutely. Technology has so much potential to change how we manage government spending.
Yeah, like Dogecoin and blockchain.
Yeah. For example, blockchain could be used to keep a record of government transactions that's completely transparent and can't be changed.
So everyone could see where every dollar's going.
Exactly. It would make it so much harder to hide waste and fraud.
Wow.
And there are other things being explored too,
Oh.
like artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Hmm.
They can be used to analyze data and find patterns that might show corruption or inefficiency.
So it's not all bad news.
No, there are solutions out there.
Yeah.
We just have to support them and demand that our elected officials actually implement them.
Feeling a bit better now.
Good.
Still a lot to process, though.
I understand it's a lot of information and the problems are complicated,
Yeah.
but the important thing is that we all have a role to play.
Okay.
Stay informed, participate in the process, and support organizations working towards these goals, and we can make a difference.
It's about taking responsibility for our democracy.
Exactly. It's about demanding a government that serves the people, not special interests.
It's a fight worth fighting.
Absolutely. The future depends on it.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I keep thinking about changing the culture, you know?
Yeah.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the numbers and feel like anything we do won't even matter.
I hear you. It definitely takes time and effort to make real change happen.
But how do we even start changing the culture?
Well, I think it starts with each person becoming aware, like
Right.
individually, and then that spreads out. Like, if enough people start demanding transparency and accountability, then those in power have to listen.
So it's not just about changing the laws. It's about changing what we expect.
Exactly. We need to stop thinking that waste and inefficiency are just unavoidable and start demanding more from our government.
For sure. And it starts with us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't just expect watchdog groups and journalists to do all the work.
Right. We have to be part of the solution.
So what can we do?
Well, think about the things we've been talking about today. What are some ideas you have to make government spending better and more accountable?
That's a good question. I think it's something we should all be thinking about.
We can't just leave it to the experts. We need to be part of the conversation.
Okay, so what can our listeners do?
Well, first, ask questions.
Okay.
Challenge the assumptions that are being made, demand transparency, and hold those in power accountable.
So to our listeners, we've taken a deep dive into this crazy world of government spending and accountability. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We definitely have.
We've learned about the problems, but we've also talked about some solutions and how much power we have as citizens.
What really stood out to you during this deep dive? What are you curious about? What will stick with you?
Because that's where it starts, with your awareness, your questions, your desire to make a difference.
And you don't have to go it alone.
Right.
Connect with people who feel the same way. Support organizations fighting for change. And we can work together to create a more accountable and transparent government.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. But until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep demanding better.